like to introduce our next speaker. So, before resigning from the U.S. State Department in 2004 due to excessive secrecy demands, Fred Burks served many years as a language interpreter for G.W. Bush, Clinton, Gore, Cheney, and many other top officials of the U.S. and other countries. After receiving a wealth of eye-opening information on major cover-ups and corruption from respected friends and colleagues, Fred was inspired to explore the dark underbelly of our world. In 2003, he developed the popular website www.wanttoknow.info to educate all who are interested to the deeper realities of our world with the purpose of inspiring us all to work together for a brighter future. He is currently Executive Director of the PEERS, P-E-E-R-S, network of websites and manager of wanttoknow.info. The title of Fred's lecture is A White House Insider's Report from Behind the Scenes. Fred will be presenting the history and uses of mind control based largely on declassified government documents and other reliable sources. Welcome, Fred.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to hear us. All right, let's see if this, there we go. Whoop. So yeah, I have the privilege of being a White House insider, once having worked in the White House with some of our presidents and seen some of what goes on behind the scenes. So we'll jump right in. One of the guiding principles of my life, and one of the things I like to say at the beginning of any talk, is that every person in the world has a heart. And when we remember that and we move from that place, we look at people differently. And every heart has a place within that just wants to love and be loved. So I invite us, even though we're talking about some really challenging information that can turn your stomach, that remember, we all have that heart, and when we come back to that, we can create transformation. So what I'll be talking about, I'm going to briefly introduce myself. Then I want to give you a concise history of mind control. And then we'll talk about the relationship between mind control and psychopaths and how they're interrelated. And then I'd like to talk about how we can use the mind control techniques for transforming our lives and our world. And then finally, ask the question, who's really in charge here? I'd like to have some good quotes. This is from Carl Jung, the famous psychologist. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. So thank you all for being here and willing to look at some of these disagreeable matters. So briefly introduce myself. Who am I? First, I would say I am somebody who lives with a deep dedication to be in service to what's best for all of us. That is my primary motivation always. I also open to inner and higher guidance always in doing this, and this brought many miracles and lots of magic in my life. And I'm also very much promote a new paradigm of love, healing, and empowerment for all. That's my base of where I move. It's a beautiful image by a friend, just image of transformation with the butterfly. So my commitment to what's best for all I believe, is what's led to many magical things in my life. I ended up living in Indonesia for 1 year and in China for 2 years, having a full-on immersive cultural experience. So rich, so different than our culture. Then, as a result of living in those countries, I ended up becoming a language interpreter at the United States Department of State, actually both in Indonesian and in Chinese, but mostly in Indonesian. I resigned in 2004 because of excessive secrecy. I interpreted for Bush, Cheney, Clinton, and Gore, many others too, quite fascinating. And then in 2001, I had already been working in the State Department and seen some things, but nothing really that rocked my core. In 2001, a friend sent me a video that was 2 hours long that just shook me to the core, and I realized, oh my God, the world is not what I thought it was. And that's what put me on my current path to try to shine light into the shadows for the purpose of transformation. And as a result of that, I founded the website wanttoknow.info, which has become fairly popular. It's all about shining light into the shadows using reliable, verifiable information. And eventually we created a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit, as an umbrella not only to wanttoknow.info, but to the other websites which I founded and manage. And I also became a whistleblower. Once I resigned from the State Department because of excessive secrecy, I realized, oh, now I can sort of tell the stories about some of the things that happened, and actually ended up being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. You can still find it on their website. Lost in Translation. How Bush Interpreter Got Through Security. It's quite a fascinating article, and the reporters actually loved my work eventually, and they mentioned the websites even in this article. So it's kind of a fun sort of coup that gave me some legitimacy. This is what the home page of wanttoknow.info looks like, just to give you a picture. And one of the things, although my goal is to shine light into the shadows, if people are left depressed or angry and that's it, I wouldn't be doing this work. I always try to encourage people that by understanding what's in the shadows, we can then empower ourselves to become more radiant beings in our lives and to really make a difference. And so since we're going into deep, disturbing material, I thought we'd start with something kind of inspiring. So here's just a 1-minute video to show you the kind of inspiring material I love to put out there.
Dismissed from drama school with a note that read, "Wasting her time. She's too shy to put her best foot forward." Turned down by the Decca recording company who said, "We don't like their sound and guitar music is on the way out." A failed soldier, farmer, and real estate agent. At 38 years old, he went to work for his father as a handyman. Cut from the high school basketball team, he went home, locked himself in his room, and cried. A teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything, and he should go into a field where he might succeed by virtue of his pleasant personality. Fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no original ideas. His fiancée died, he failed in business twice, he had a nervous breakdown, and he was defeated in 8 elections. If you've never failed, you've never lived.
Not bad for 1 minute, huh? Yes, let's all take risks at times. We risk being magnificent. Here's a fun little cartoon by someone who's become a supporter of our work. Welcome to herd mentality. Population, nearly everyone. All right, so let's dive in. Mind control, a concise history. And I'm sure some of you know something about mind control, but you'll learn something new, I imagine, here. Another great quote, Gloria Steinem. "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." So we're going to start with a piece. This was a History Channel documentary called Mind Control, America's Secret War. It's an amazing documentary. And I'm going to show you just the first 3 minutes of introduction so you can see what is in this
History Channel, where the past comes alive.
Coming up, the government's bizarre experiments in mind control using human guinea pigs. The Cold War had an unlikely battleground, the human brain.
In 5 weeks, I had 109 electroconvulsive shock treatments and megadoses of hallucinogenic drugs.
Test subjects underwent hypnosis, electroshock, and drug-induced hallucinations without their knowledge and without their consent.
There's been
thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people subjected to really damaging, unethical experimentation.
In June 1951, a top-secret CIA memo expressed the need to explore, quote, scientific methods for controlling the minds of individuals, unquote. Testing those so-called scientific methods would require thousands of men and women who became unwitting subjects in experiments ranging from the unusual to the bizarre. But it was all justified in the name of national security.
In a posh New York City apartment, a prostitute offers her client a cocktail before having sex with him. What the man doesn't know is that his drink has been laced with LSD and that the entire encounter is being recorded on film.
Personnel would watch them having sex with the prostitutes while high on LSD through one-way mirrors.
In Montreal, a young mother suffering from postpartum depression is reduced to a vegetative state.
He was trying to drive my previous life out.
In a federal penitentiary in California, a prisoner dies after being given massive doses of a muscle relaxant to suppress his violent behavior.
These were horrendously damaging experiments, and in fact, they just didn't give a damn about the people who were the subjects of them.
These are not scenes made up in the mind of a novelist or a screenwriter. They are recreations of actual events, examples of top-secret mind control experiments funded by the United States government.
This is way out of the realm of fiction or supposition or conspiracy theory or speculation. This is absolute documented fact.
Your tax dollars at work. Sadly enough, this is sponsored by the US government. So let's get into the history of mind control. The military became interested in mind control in the early 20th century. They realized that hypnosis had some power over people and wanted to see if they could put it to military advantage. And they discovered that they could create something that became called a Manchurian candidate later. And a Manchurian candidate basically is someone who has MPD, which is multiple personality disorder. Although that term's not actually used by the people who study such things, now it's called dissociative identity disorder, DID. But most people know it as MPD, so I still will use multiple personality, even though it's not the correct term. I'll read you a quote from 1971 Science Digest. It's a Dr. G.H. Estabrooks, who was a PhD and a master hypnotist. And here's his quote. By the 1920s, clinical hypnotists learned to split certain individuals into multiple personalities, like Jekyll Hydes. During World War II, I worked this technique with a Marine I'll call Jones. I split his personality into Jones A and Jones B. Jones A, once a normal Marine, became entirely different. He talked communist doctrine and meant it. He was welcomed enthusiastically by communist cells and was deliberately given a dishonorable discharge. Jones B was the deeper personality, knew all the thoughts of Jones A, and was imprinted to say nothing during conscious phases. All I had to do was hypnotize him, get in touch with Jones B, and I had a pipeline straight into the communist camp. So they split his personality, causing him to become a Manchurian candidate and put him into the communist cells. Do you think they ever did this with anti-war campaigns or anything like that? So these people don't even realize that they're spying, because their conscious personality is not aware of the hidden personality. So that's Manchurian candidate, which is vital to understand to this whole program. So when this technology became almost perfected was during World War II. Sadly, in the concentration camps, Dr. Joseph Mengele, who was known as the Angel of Death at Auschwitz, had permission to do anything he wanted with his prisoners. And he was determined to figure out how to control the minds of anybody. And he was actually quite successful. what he found is that though some people are not very susceptible to hypnosis, if you inject them with drugs, and we even know what drugs they use, they combine an upper and a downer. An upper makes you all buzzed, and a downer brings you down. Your body becomes so confused that then you become susceptible to hypnosis. So then you combine the hypnosis and throw in a little torture, and when you're tortured, your core personality wants to escape. And that's how they get a new personality to come in. So you've got drugs running, you've got hypnosis, you're being tortured, boom. You cannot handle it, and so another part comes up and is developed. And they can create many parts like this. So Mengele was able to take somebody, and basically in the course of a few hours, and he could do this to you or me, guaranteed, you could not resist. And then you walk out of the office, not remember anything that happened, and you would be then programmed as a Manchurian candidate. And they would use code words to be able to call out the different personalities. So Mengele perfected this in World War II at Auschwitz. He was basically allowed to escape to South America, and you can find there's very good evidence on all this. We actually don't have proof, but there's very good evidence supporting all of this. And you can find all of that on wanttoknow.info and in other sources. And then Mengele was secretly brought in to train the CIA in about 1948 to start training CIA agents how to create Manchurian candidates so that we could use this. So this next clip is another clip from the History Channel, which talks a little bit about this specific aspect of mind control.
In 1946, the world learns that the US and Russia are not the only superpowers testing mind control techniques. Former Nazi doctors on trial in Nuremberg, Germany, reveal that concentration camps were fertile ground for unwitting mind control subjects.
The Nazis were also looking for mind weapons too, and they had a unit set up at Dachau at the concentration camp at which prisoners were the test subject. There was no shortage of subjects, and there was not the slightest bit of compunction of doing anything evil or bad to them. I mean, they were testing drugs, they were testing mescaline, things like that. One of the experiments that was done was to hypnotize somebody and then ask him to kill somebody. In other words, to see if they would pull the trigger.
Unfortunately, they were quite successful, and they found that they could even have people kill family members once they're hypnotized. So many people believe that when you're under hypnosis, you would never do something that's morally against your soul or whatever. It's just not true. Once they've programmed you in certain ways, they can make you do almost anything. Let's all take a breath. As I said, this is really disturbing information, and I applaud you for being here. And I know when I first learned about this, it really turned my stomach. And I want to acknowledge that this can make you feel uncomfortable. And yet, by shining light in these shadows, that's what allows us to do something about it. So let's continue with the history of mind control. So why did the CIA feel compelled to do this? The sad truth is that the Soviet and the Chinese, who did not have the same ethical constraints as the US, were far advanced. And they realized in the US, particularly the CIA, like, oh my God, we've been infiltrated by these Manchurian candidates. We're way behind. And so there was a justification. I'm not saying it was a good justification, but there was a justification for actually doing these things. And of course, they couldn't reveal what they were doing or it would have been shut down. So this is where we can have a little bit of compassion that even though these seem like terrible, monstrous things they're doing, they felt they had no choice. In fact, on the subject of moral issue, well, I'll get to that in a minute. But so in 1950, projects Bluebird, Artichoke, and MK Ultra, which is the most infamous of all, were developed. And all of these were focused on various aspects of controlling people's minds and behavior. In 1973, it started coming out and actually hit the news. And, 73 is when Helms knew that the Congress was starting to get wind of what was going on. And so the director of the CIA at the time, Helms, ordered that all documents be destroyed because it was just too incriminating. They knew it was illegal. As again, I said they felt like they had no choice, but in order to cover their tracks, if there's going to be a congressional investigation, I've heard that there were on the order of 2 million pages worth of documents that were destroyed. In 1976, there was the investigation. The U.S. Senate Committee, the Church Committee, and exposed the mind control programs and many other programs. And Helms was brought to testify at that committee, and his response, in quotes, was, "We have no answer to the moral issue." And then what happened is shortly after all of these, and this news actually all hit the New York Times, and by the way, you can find, we actually have the full articles that were published in the New York Times and other newspapers that show all of the crazy things that the CIA was doing with these programs. 1977, Freedom of Information Act requests turned up initially 16,000 pages worth of documents that were in the financial aspect of the program. Helms didn't think that there would be anything in the financial stuff, but apparently, well, not apparently, it's true that in these documents, you can read them, they have to give justification for the programs. And just in those justifications, it's unbelievable the stuff that is revealed. We're going to go into that in a bit. Since then, more has turned up, and currently there are approximately 20,000 pages worth of CIA declassified documents on the mind control programs that anybody can order. And I was amazed when I first learned about this in 2003. All right, I'm going to order them. And sure enough, I sent in my $30, and it was about just over 2 weeks, and I received 3 DVDs that I put into my computer and got all 20,000 pages. And we have, by the way, you don't have to pay the $30 because we posted them all and want to know that info. All 20,000 pages, so you can read them there. Or you can pay the $30 and just check it out for yourself. So wasn't just mind control of it, but I want to show you one other way that they used control, which kind of relates to a little bit of psychopathy too. This woman was a secretary at the CIA, and she eventually got fed up and became a kind of a whistleblower too, and she's going to tell you about one of the things that they uncovered during the Church Commission.
Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does,
Church Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the person. So when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy? Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was hit.
So think about that. You've got a gun with a dart. Somebody can fire it, so it could be sitting in this room or sitting across the street if they're a sharpshooter, and they fire it at you. You don't feel anything. Say at the most it was like a little mosquito. What was that? And the dart is just made of poison. It denatures, it melts in your blood. You have a heart attack. So, to everybody's knowledge, you died of a heart attack. But what actually happened is you were just assassinated. And the poison denatures, as she mentioned, so that unless you do an autopsy within a couple hours, there's no evidence of anything. So think about how many political leaders had heart attacks at kind of inopportune times. And how do we know what happened? And remember that this is 1976. And think about how much more sophisticated that technology might have gotten since then. We have evidence that they know how to cause strokes now without evidence, without any sort of evidence left behind, and many other things. Let's take another breath. Oh, there we go. I wanted to make sure that I remembered that, so I put in a slide. Okay, so now we want to go into some of the declassified documents so you can see what kind of material is here. Each of the CIA documents is given a MORI ID. MORI stands for Management of Officially Released Information. And this one is, they didn't have an actual date on it, but they estimated the date as January 1st, 1950. This was what they were exploring. Can we create, by post-hypnotic control, an action contrary to an individual's basic moral principles? We've already talked about that, and the answer was yes to that one. Can we alter a person's personality? Can we guarantee amnesia under any and all conditions? Well, they already knew they could alter people's personalities from World War I. Basically, they learned to do that. But can we guarantee amnesia under any and all conditions? The answer is probably no to any and all. But they found that if you at least refresh a person's programming every month, then it could stay good for as long as you want. If you don't refresh it, eventually it will start to fade. And that's where we've gotten a lot of information from people who eventually started having recovered memories. Can we devise a system for making unwilling subjects into willing agents and then transfer that control to untrained agency agents in the field by the use of codes? And this is what they did, and I'll be reading some documents that show you how they did this. So you think about it, again, they could take anybody, you or me, and go through this process. Now they've got you programmed, they have a certain code word like September 33rd. That could just be a simple code word that nobody would ever say normally, right? And if they say September 33rd to you, boom, it kicks in a certain personality. And then that control could actually be passed from one person to another. There'd always be what they called a handler who would handle each person, and then that could actually be passed to another person. Can we seize a subject and in the space of an hour, by post-hypnotic control, have him crash an airplane? Think about that. Think about all the ways that things could have looked like normal crashes. Might have been somebody who was programmed to do something, and boom. It shows you that there's a whole history that we're not aware of. And it's hard to know what was programmed and what was just true accident. Here's what one of the pages of one of these documents looks like. And I just wanted you to have an image of a full page. So there's about 20,000 pages that look somewhat like this. I wanted to read you one of the documents first. So this is from a declassified document dated January 7th, 1953. And it describes the creation of multiple personality being done in two 19-year-old girls. Quote, "These subjects have clearly demonstrated that they can pass from a fully awake state to a deep hypnotic controlled state by telephone, by receiving written matter, or by the use of code, signal, or words that control of those hypnotized can be passed from one individual to another without great difficulty." So this 1953 document says that the answer to a few of those questions was clearly yes. Now we're going to focus in on this document right here, the couple paragraphs. I'm just going to focus in. So I'm going to read it to you, but this is document MORI ID 19061, February 10th, 1954. "A post-hypnotic of the night before, pointed finger, you will sleep, was enacted. Mrs. Deleted, the names are always blacked out like that in these documents. That was standard practice when something is declassified. Mrs. Deleted and Deleted, two people, two 19-year-old girls, immediately progressed to a deep hypnotic state with no further suggestion. They'd already been trained. Miss Deleted was then instructed, having previously expressed a fear of firearms in any fashion, that she would use every method at her disposal to awaken Miss Deleted, now in a deep hypnotic sleep. And failing this, she would pick up a pistol nearby and fire it at Miss Deleted. She was instructed that her rage would be so great that she would not hesitate to kill Deleted for failing to awaken." So these are mostly college girls that were recruited saying, you're going to help your nation if you'll come and let us do these experiments on you. And so That's the first part of it. The second part, Miss Deleted carried out these suggestions to the letter, including firing the unloaded pneumatic pistol. She did not know it was unloaded. She thought she was really killing her. At Deleted, and then proceeding to fall into a deep sleep. After proper suggestions were made, both were awakened and expressed complete amnesia for the entire sequence. Miss Deleted was again handed the gun, which she refused in an awakened state to pick up or accept from the operator. She expressed absolute denial that the foregoing sequence had happened. So think about that. You take these 19-year-old college girls, and they're turning her into an assassin. And she doesn't even have any memory that she just picked up a pistol and fired it at this other woman who was in a trance. Take a breath. And again, this is a declassified CIA document that anyone can access. You can buy it. They'll give you 100 pages free if you want to just get 100 pages and ask for this specific document, or you can pay the $20 and get the whole, or $30 and get the whole 20,000 pages worth. Anybody here seen the movie The Manchurian Candidate? So this movie is much more real than you would ever imagine. A lot of stuff in there is taken almost directly from the stuff that they were doing. So I want to read you one more that shows you just how sophisticated this technology became. This one is from CIA Mori ID 190527, September 25th, 1951. It's describing an experiment entitled SI and H experimentation. SI is sleep induction, H is hypnosis. It says 2 female subjects took part. They tended to like to do these young female subjects. And almost all the documents say, 2 young female subjects took part in an exercise involving the planting of a bomb. Both performed perfectly and were fully amnesic for the exercise. Deleted was instructed that upon awakening, she would proceed to Deleted room, where she would wait at the desk for a telephone call. Upon receiving the call, a person known as Jim would engage her in normal conversation. During the course of the conversation, this individual would mention a code word. When she heard this code word, she would pass into an SI trance state, sleep-induced trance state, but would not close her eyes and remain perfectly normal and continue the telephone conversation. She was told that upon conclusion of the telephone conversation, she would carry out the instructions. Deleted was shown an electric timing device. She was informed that this device was a bomb and was then instructed how to attach and set the device. After Deleted learned how to set and attach the device, she was told to take the timing device, which was in a briefcase, and proceed to the ladies' room. In the ladies' room, she would be met by a girl whom she had never seen, who would identify herself by the code word New York. Deleted was then to show this individual how to attach and set the timing device, and further instructions would be given that the timing device was to be carried in the briefcase to Deleted room, placed in the nearest empty electric light plug, and concealed in the bottom left-hand drawer of Deleted desk, with the device set to 82 seconds and turned on. So again, these 2 girls have no idea that they're doing this. Afterwards, they have zero memory. But one person is being trained how to do it, and she's actually passing it to another just to make sure all tracks are covered. And you think how many bombings that may have happened were actually by people who've been programmed to be Manchurian candidates and have no idea that they're even doing this. And again, this is all developed in the 1950s. So now, some of you know about 9/11. There's serious questions about 9/11. You start to think, what about those hijackers? And what about a lot of things? If you start investigating 9/11, there's a lot of strange stuff there. And if you don't know about that, I encourage you to take a look if you have the stomach for it. Another thing to consider that, remember, the Russians and the Chinese were ahead of the US in all of this stuff. So it's not just the CIA that was playing with this stuff. There are factions from groups and even business groups around the world that have access to this technology and that use it. So think about all these different factions trying to plant spies and Manchurian candidates in each other's midst. And once again, too, notice the mention of use of all these girls. Do you think they might have been doing anything else with these girls when they're hypnotized? Yeah. Here's one last one. Oh, no, it's not the last one, but this is a really important one. This is CIA Mori ID 17748, and it's labeled TSD. Well, TSD stands for the Technical Services Division of CIA, which is the division which carried out all these programs. So it says 26 July 1963, Memorandum for Director of Central Intelligence from CIA Inspector General. So the CIA Inspector General was tasked to explore what was going on with these programs and report to the director of the CIA. And this is taken verbatim from the report. The concepts involved in manipulating behavior are found by many people within and outside the agency, the CIA, to be distasteful and unethical. Nevertheless, there have been major accomplishments both in research and operational employment. Over the 10-year life of the program, many additional avenues of the control of human behavior have been designated under the MK Ultra Charter, including radiation, electroshock, and harassment substances. Some activities raise questions of legality implicit in the original charter. A final phase of the testing places the rights and interests of U.S. citizens in jeopardy. Technical Services Division initiated a program for covert testing of materials on unwitting U.S. citizens in 1955. TSD has pursued a philosophy of minimum documentation in keeping with the high sensitivity of the projects. Some files contained little or no data at all. There are just 2 individuals in TSD who have full knowledge of the MK Ultra program. So again, even when they're doing some of these, some of them were so intense that they didn't even want to write it down. And there's just a couple people who really were overseeing all of these programs. And we're fairly certain that Mengele was, I don't know if he's one of those 2 people, but he was right there involved with all this stuff. And again, you wonder, they were doing this in the 50s, how advanced has it becoming now? I'm looking forward to Jeff's research on that. Once again, let's take a breath. And one thing I like to remind people is that every one of us at some times in our life has manipulated for our own personal gain. We all have that capability of doing that. And some, like these people, have done it for much more. And some people involved in this program thought they were doing the right thing. It was the only thing they could do. And so unlike the psychopaths, we can have a little bit of compassion and understanding, but we can also work to stop the craziness. So here's a fun little cartoon. And my eyes aren't very good, so I have to get close. Here's a seminar that teaches how to come to a complete realization of things as they truly are. What do you think? No good. I'm looking to escape things as they truly are. And it's true, a lot of people are too overwhelmed in their lives. They don't want to look at this stuff, and I even understand that. It's like, this is just going to make me more crazy. So this is where I applaud people like you to being here to actually look at this stuff, because you have the bandwidth to make a difference. And as the more and more of us stand up, we will make a difference. All the darkness in the world cannot put out the light of a single candle. So what about mind control for personal pleasure? We mentioned those young women that they were experimenting on. There is one declassified CIA document which actually explicitly discusses this. It was written obviously by somebody who was very disturbed with what was going on. And he was a member of a class. He was being taught by a hypnotist how to do some of these techniques. And he's going to share what the hypnotist was telling the class. So I'm going to read to you this declassified CIA document 140393, page 1, dated July 9th, 1951. I think I have a close-up of this. Yes, so you can read along if you like. On 2 July 1951, approximately 1 p.m., the instruction began with deleted, relating to the student some of his sexual experiences. Deleted stated that he had constantly used hypnotism as a means of inducing young girls to engage in sexual intercourse with him. Deleted, a performer in Deleted Orchestra, was forced to engage in sexual intercourse with Deleted while under the influence of hypnotism. Deleted stated that he first put her into a hypnotic trance and then suggested to her that he was her husband and that she desired sexual intercourse with him. Declassified CIA document. Again, take a breath. This is intense stuff, and that's why it's important just to take a break. And I apologize for having to deliver this kind of yucky information. But again, it's better to know than not to know. Here's just a nice image for a break. Yeah. Sorry, I keep banging this microphone thing. Okay, so now we're going to get into here, first, Albert Einstein. The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of those who are evil, but because of those who don't do anything about it. Albert Einstein. So now we're going to talk about secret cults and psychopaths. So there are people who work with survivors of these things who've been discovering that there's consistent patterns of people who've been programmed as Manchurian candidates, and that it's not just the government and secret programs, that there are actually these cults that are doing the same thing. And these cults have been causing all sorts of problems, and a number of people who work in the fields have run into the problems, and they're finding it's very difficult to deprogram these people because it's gotten quite sophisticated. So at a conference that occurred, it was the annual Eastern Regional Conference on Abuse and Multiple Personality on June 25th, 1992, a professor from Utah by the name of Professor D. Corridon Hammond, for the first time stood up and said, it's time to let the cat out of the bag. We all know this stuff is happening, we got to talk about it. And here's a quote. We have the entire lecture that he gave, which is amazing. Then we have a summary of it, because he was the first one to speak publicly about what they were finding in these victims. So here you have it. When you find the same highly esoteric information in different states, from Florida to California, and from different countries, you start to get an idea that there's something going on that is very large and very, very well coordinated. So I've gone from someone not knowing what to think about it at all to someone who clearly believes ritual abuse is real. I have concern because of personal threats. This is what he said in that lecture. I finally decided to hell with them. If they're going to kill me, they're going to kill me. It's time to share more information with therapists. So he knew that he might be killed. Now, the interesting thing, after he gave this amazing lecture, and it goes into depth about how these cults are doing weird things, he got a standing ovation. People were just thrilled for finally somebody is talking about it. And after that, he never talked about it again. And I have a woman on our board knows him personally and was there at that talk. And she told me that everyone has little doubt that it wasn't him that was threatened. They threatened his daughters. He said, if you continue with this, watch what happens to your daughters. And I actually reached him on the phone because I thought this was important, and he refused to talk about it. He said, nope, we're not talking about that one. So they have ways of keeping people from talking about this stuff. Now, how many of you know about the unfolding pedophile scandals in UK that is reaching to the highest levels? It's been reported in the major media over in UK a lot. And interestingly enough, Australia has a 60-minute program like ours, 60 Minutes. And it took Australia to tie all the strings together of what's going on with this program, and they came out with a great 60-minute sections. It's like, I think it's like 38 minutes long. And I'm just going to play a little clip from that.
Without question, the biggest political scandal Britain has ever faced will be exposed tonight. It involves a secret network of the highest office holders in the land, past and current members of Parliament, cabinet ministers, judges, diplomats, even one of the country's top spies. These men are accused of some of the most sadistic child sexual abuse imaginable on hundreds of victims, some as young as 8. More confronting still are claims that children were killed in order to protect this network of predators.
This was aired on July 19th, 2015, just a few months ago. And the high-level spies, the head of the MI6 of England's CIA has been directly implicated in all of this. It has also reached the palace and the royal family. And it continues to unfold. And if you keep your ears out, you will hear. But they're doing everything they can, of course, to keep it from coming out. So there's this huge battle going on behind the scenes that they're losing because of people like you and me that are trying to do something about this. So again, you can find this documentary on our website. It's well worth watching. It's called Spies, Lords, and Predators. And it's an amazing expose of what's going on. So now I'm going to actually go into the most disturbing part, and this is also the least reliable. So this is all based on information that somebody who was in one of these cults. There's a woman who managed to escape. Her name's Svali. Anybody heard of her? Okay, a couple of people here, yes. She's quite a hero because once she escaped, she was willing to talk about it, and she knew she was, could be threatened and killed. But they actually let her speak because they figured nobody would believe it. And so for 6 years, she actually published on the internet amazing information. She had risen in the ranks of her cult to where she was training people how to turn the children, their own children, into Manchurian candidates. So what you need to understand is that this is a family thing. If you're a parent, you actually can have control over your child by turning them into a Manchurian candidate. And then they can also be used by the cult when they need for certain purposes. So she was actually somebody who trained people how to do this. And she put out amazing information for how to deprogram people, how to get them out of the cults, and she was a hero. And if you read her information, you'll see she's just very smart, and no, she wasn't like a conspiracy theorist or anything. She's just speaking the truth from her experience. Powerful stuff. It's the best information I have found on how psychopaths are created by this secretive cult network. So Svali, obviously, is a pseudonym. She didn't want to give her real name, and she was born into the cult. So it is believed, and if Svali is right, this cult has networks around the world. They're involved in all countries, and they tend to work together. They use the nations just as a way of making people believe that there's a lot of conflict, but they're actually somewhat united. Not all completely united, but they work for a deeper agenda. And Svali says that they trained children with these intense mind control techniques from the age of 4. Children were conditioned to be obedient, to be self-controlled, and to be loyal to what they called the family. They didn't call themselves a cult. Very few people are in a cult are going to call themselves a cult. They actually called themselves the family. And all of the people in the cult were Manchurian candidates. So many of these people had no idea that they're even in a cult. So they're called into an alter personality, often in the middle of the night. They would be called to on a phone or something like that. Code word, boom, they go in, they do their training, they come home, they wake up in the morning, they don't even know that they just went out at night and did these activities.
What kinds of activities?
Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time, but they'd be training people to do various tasks and roles. And so all of this was done in extreme secrecy, but it's so if people were found out, it's not hard because nobody would believe them. If you don't know all this information, you just couldn't believe that this is real. But when you start looking at it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So again, they start very young using drugs, hypnosis, and shock reward conditioning. And so that if the child didn't do what they're supposed to do, they'd be shocked, pain. And if they did, they got wonderful rewards. So you have a very strong incentive for each of these, even their sub-personalities, to really excel in whatever they were going to do. And this is a generational thing. As I said, this is something we believe actually it was developed even before MKUltra and all of that, that these cults were doing similar type things. And there are certain families, and we think even of possibly the Bush family, that do this to their children regularly. And again, we don't know how much they know because the core personality may even not know what they're doing. I'm just going to give you one example that's really disturbing, just so you have an idea. And I apologize that it's disturbing, but Savali talks about this. It gets how they're turned into psychopaths. So a kid, by the parents, would have a little favorite kitten that they love to play with. And they would encourage the child to kind of develop a relationship with this kitten. And then it was time. They were brought into a room, and they were told, okay, now as part of your training, it's time to take the kitty, strangle it, and wring its neck, kill it. And of course, the child would refuse. As soon as they refuse, they get shocked. Kill the cat. Shock. And of course, it would take a while, but eventually it starts hurting enough that they're forced and they kill the cat. What does that do to a 4-year-old child? And so now you have an idea of how psychopaths can be created. And I hate to tell you this, and it can get worse, and I'm not going to go. That's hard enough. You get the idea. When a 4-year-old has to kill its pet, emotions are gone. So these children go on to become psychopaths, who then will easily commit theft. They'll entrap targeted individuals sexually or otherwise for purposes of blackmail. They'll even kill when needed. Basically, all members of this secretive cult have virtually no morals or ethics. They're all about power and control for themselves. And that is what is actually, I believe, behind a lot of the wars that go on, because wars are incredibly profitable and help to keep us in fear and control. So members of this worldwide secretive cult are almost by definition psychopaths. They are placed in positions of power in government and corporations to achieve ever greater power and control. You can find them in key positions of power in the military-industrial complex, the drug companies and government agencies which oversee them, the prison industry, and much more. And key members of this cult band together in certain secret societies. Some of you may have heard of the Bilderberg Group, which is some of the leaders of our world, and it's suspected that many of those people are involved in these things. Skull and Bones, both Kerry and Bush were members of this secret society, and on television they were asked, and they said, oh, no, we're sworn to secrecy. They're in the same group, which is a small group, only 15 new people every year, and yet they couldn't talk about Skull and Bones. The Freemasons, and not all Freemasons are, you have to be careful. You can't say that certain groups are all part of this cult. But some Freemasons are involved in this, and high-level Freemasons often get, and we have some information. If you go to wanttoknow.info and do a search on Freemasons, you can find some really interesting stuff. There's something on C Street. This has actually made the press, and a guy wrote a book that got a lot of press about a group called the Family or the Fellowship. Any of you heard? Amazing book that I've read, and it talks about how this top politicians were involved in this group too. So there's all these secret societies where they basically, like in Skull and Bones, there's a commitment. You're going to help your fellow brother Skull and Bones members above all else. Doesn't matter party affiliation, just to make sure that they're in power. So this is going to another piece from that Australian 60 Minutes documentary that I just told you about. And it talks about the pedophile information exchange in England. In the 1970s, there was a group called the Pedophile Information Exchange that believed the age for consent for sex should be lowered to 4. And they lobbied for this. And it was out in the open. It wasn't like widely publicized or anything. And key members of Parliament were involved in it. And this is all documented. You can find this, and several people were arrested, but many were not. This guy Whoops, what happened? Okay, breathe. Let's see if I can go back here, hopefully, yes. This guy, could you hold off on a sec, please?
Tell us what pi was all about.
Okay. Thanks. This guy, in 2015, is willing to say, I still support all of this stuff. And he was one of the founders of pi. So you're going to hear what he has to say, just so you have an idea. Okay.
Pedophile information exchange.
Pi was an organization for people who had a sexual attraction to children, and we thought our illegal interest in children ought to be made legal if it concerned relations with young people who were consenting to a relationship, if they were willingly involved.
Tom O'Carroll is a self-confessed, unrepentant pedophile and one of the founding members of the Pedophile Information Exchange. He now shies away from advocating the age of 4. Too easily misunderstood, he says.
The age of 4 came into it insofar as children by that age are normally verbal and can normally say whether they are liking a particular kind of activity or not.
You believe and advocate that it should be okay for an adult to have consenting sexual relations with a child aged 10, so long as it doesn't involve penetrative sex.
Well, the emphasis here is on consenting, the willing, free, uncoerced involvement of the child, yes.
Can I ask you this though, do you believe still that the majority of children at the age of 10 can communicate their consent to a sexual act?
Yes, I do, yes. I don't see that is a problem, communicating their consent.
What constitutes consent?
The willing involvement of a child. It's really quite simple.
But how does one judge that?
That is a matter, as it is with adult consent, for the people involved.
So there you have it, 60 minutes documentary, and this guy is walking around advocating that he describes in the documentary, like, well, if a 4-year-old is bouncing on you, she's having a lot of fun and she wants to play with you, what's wrong with that? So this is, and again, there's members of parliament, lords, and members of their intelligence service were part of this pedophile information exchange. So if you're like me, the world's not what I thought it was. It's like, holy shit. You know, and it's like, okay, and so what are we going to do with this? And that's what got me going on getting this website going. And it's funny, people ask me if I've ever been targeted. And no, because I think it's because I'm not working against anybody. I'm very clear, as I said in the beginning, every person in the world has a heart. And I'm going to value that heart. I don't care if they're a psychopath or not. I don't care if they're a pedophile or not. They have a heart. But I'm going to do everything I can to stop their behavior that's destructive. And if necessary, put them in jail. I worked on a psych unit where we had kids, 8-year-olds, who would just go crazy, and they do everything they can to hurt other people or hurt me even, and we had to put them into 4-point restraint. With the kid, it's easy. We could still see that this is just a mixed up kid who grew up in really terrible circumstances. And so we'd have to take them down for their own safety and our safety into 4-point restraint. Sounds terrible, but there's no choice if a kid is out of control. So I see the psychopaths like this. It's like they're out of control. They don't realize how messed up they are. And yes, we got to do everything we can to stop them, but we can do it with compassion. So now we can breathe again. So now we get to the good part. I wouldn't give you all this terrible stuff without talking about some of the amazing potentials of the same technology that is used for control can be used for empowerment and transformation in our worlds. The guy on the left who's representing fear says, look, if you want to make it big in sales, you're going to have a simple product that's easy for people to understand. Fear. And over here, he's standing peace, love, and understanding. And it's like, you know, you look at the numbers today, somebody's talking to me like, if people knew about this, you know, thousands of people would be interested, but they don't want to know. It's uncomfortable to know this stuff. And that's why it's not an easy thing to create the change, but we're doing it. I can tell you, so many people have contacted me from around the world that want to support this work. And my work, the work of Jordan, who's putting on this conference, and other people, it is making a huge difference, and it is being exposed. The fact that that documentary was made in Australia and that Mind Control, the History Channel documentary was made, is evidence that it's all coming out, and it's just going to take some time. Beautiful image by Tika Luttrell, is a wonderful friend who's given permission to use all his amazing imagery. Buckminster Fuller, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So here's how we build a new model. How many of you know about biofeedback and the Heart Math Institute? There are, thank you, yes, that's great. There are machines now that you can attach to you that measure all your different autonomic nervous system functions. And you can learn to control what's normally not controllable. You can control your heartbeat, you control how nervous you are. So using biofeedback for good, we can actually learn to have better control over our emotions. And the Heart Math Institute is also teaching people, it helps you to get into a meditative state where you can make decisions and choices from a calmer place. And it's very exciting. And unfortunately, it gets way less press than it should be, because this stuff is amazing. Anybody here tried some of this stuff? Yeah, it can do amazing things. I just saw a video last night of a guy who's been able to train himself to swim. He digs a hole in ice. It's called the Iceman. One hole here, another hole 100 feet away. He dives in ice water and he can swim 100 feet underwater and come out because he's done these kind of things where he can train himself. And people say he's a Superman. He says, no, every one of you could do this. I can train you. And he actually trains people how to do this. We have amazing capabilities that are untapped when we start using things like biofeedback. Meditation, I think you all know, if we have a regular meditation practice, it just helps to calm our whole system down. It creates a clarity. And I do consider it a form of positive mind control. Entheogens. Some of you may not know that term. Entheogens are mind-altering substances, aka drugs, that can put you into an altered state that actually can be used for healing. So you may not know that LSD was made popular by the CIA. They wanted to know how it affected people, so they handed it out to professors and college students, which got the whole movement going. The CIA took it from Sandoz in Switzerland, and they were using it for control. They wanted it for power and control. But the same stuff can be used for healing. They're having amazing success using ecstasy to heal PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're using mushrooms and LSD. They've had success even in healing some severe psychiatric disorders. And for a long time, they weren't even allowed to use these, but now finally the government is giving permission to do studies. And they're being under very controlled environments. Nobody's advocating that we need to all be taking drugs again. But under the right circumstances, same things that are used to control these drugs that put people into hypnotic states can also be used for incredible healing. Stanislav Grof is one of the people at the forefront of this, who has spoke here at this IONS Institute and had amazing success in healing diseases that are not supposed to be healable. Hypnotherapy. How many here have ever been subject to hypnotherapy? It's amazing. I'm actually a certified hypnotherapist, and I can tell you amazing stories that are just unbelievable how it's transformed people's lives. One guy was traumatized when twice in his life, people that he didn't even know beat him to a pulp and he almost died. And so he just walked around in life always scared. And I guess I'll talk very briefly. It took 10 sessions, but he finally was ready to go there and it actually spontaneously, I did not direct him to do this. I go, what's the core? I took him to a place, and go back now to the core of where this wound came from. He jumped to a past life as a Native American. And he was just in absolute awe. He knew everything about this village, and actually gave him 5 minutes to just enjoy being in this. I remember this and that. I was describing everything in the village. And then I said, now remember what's brought you here. what do you see related to the four guys who attacked you? And he said, oh my God. And they were hauling rocks. They were his slaves. He was one of the chiefs of the village. His slaves hauling rocks and being treated very cruelly. And somehow this knowledge of that past life, he was relieved. He came back for one more session after that, but he said, I'm just coming to check, but I'm good. I'm done. And so that's the power of hypnotherapy. It can take wounds that you could never release otherwise and go in and find out what's the deep core and release it. And hypnosis, remember, was being used by the CIA to control people and cause them to do crazy things. So remember, all of this technology can be turned around. And if we all do that on a massive scale, guess what? Humanity can make progress in leaps and bounds. So when we're willing to look into the shadows, take that technology and turn it around into light, wow, watch out. Great quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. If only there were evil people somewhere, insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? Awesome quote. So one of the questions, I get to do a lot of radio interviews and podcasts and stuff, and people ask, like, so who is really behind it? Who's behind this whole cult and network, and who's creating all of this stuff? And some of you might be able to guess my answer to that. Who's really in charge? You. Because every one of us, by how we interpret what happens to us, we are the ones who ultimately determine what happens in our lives. When you get hit by a car unexpectedly, what's your response? Do you go into pain and start like, oh, that's so, and do you go into anger? Or do you go into like, oh, I just had an accident. Bummer, man, major drag. Okay, what's next? So by how you respond, you don't have choice necessarily over what happens to you. You don't have choice if you're born into one of these cult families and you get put into this. But you have choice in every moment in how you respond to anything that happens to you. And it's those choices in every moment that make a difference in your life. And so I truly believe that you are the one who has the biggest impact on how much you enjoy your life or not. It has nothing to do with all these people want you to believe that they have control. They want you to be in fear. They sell fear. And yet when you become conscious of yourself and make more conscious choices and choose to move from the heart, that's when you really start to have fun. And I can say I've been very blessed in my life to have many miracles around this kind of stuff. There's a personal friend of mine who just said something, like, oh my God, it's so profound. The more I face my fears, the more fearless I become. And really consider that as you think about how scary some of this stuff is. The more we face our fears, the more fearless and courageous we can become in moving forward. So here's a couple ideas on what you can do about all this. Educate yourself. Form discussion groups, action groups. There are online forums that are talking about this stuff and what can we do about it. Tell your friends. Now, many of your friends aren't going to be able to handle it, and I advise don't push it on them. If people are too overwhelmed with their lives, don't try to get them on board with this stuff. Wait till they're ready. But you have some friends, I'm sure you can think of one or two at least that would be interested, like, wow, this person would really appreciate knowing this information. Get together in groups, talk about it. Explore the mind control section at wanttoknow.info. It's really filled with amazing, reliable stuff that you'll be amazed. There's very little, like Savali is one of the things that we don't even put it up there. You'll have to do a special search to find Savali because it's not considered reliable enough. I felt it was necessary because of our topic to bring it in, but it's mostly very reliable information. And you'll be amazed at some of the great documentaries like the ones you've seen and summaries of excellent material. Post on social media while also giving hope. So in other words, like I regularly post on Facebook, but I make sure that I mix up the dark stuff with inspiration and hope that we can do something about it. If you're just putting it out there and making people angry and upset, I don't think it really helps the problem. So watch how you balance your presentation. Contact and educate media and political representatives. I think this is really important. People don't realize sometimes how much impact it has. If you make a call to your congressman, they actually count that. And a call is worth like a certain amount. And if you send a letter, that's worth a certain amount. And they look at all of this stuff. And if enough people start speaking, they listen and they will start reporting it. And by the way, we have a page on wanttoknow.info that specifically tells you the phone numbers and email addresses of all your media and political people. That it's just, you plug it in, it gives you all the information. And this is a key. Explore in your life, where do you control and manipulate? We all do it. We've sometimes decided, well, I'm doing this for the higher good. But you're manipulating for the higher good. And maybe there's times when that's necessary, but I think we want to avoid manipulation as much as possible. And really look what we, particularly with our partners and our family, that's where we tend to do it the most because we go unconscious. And really, when we start getting our own lives in order, then everything else becomes easier. Howard Zinn, who passed away last year or the year before, great historian and author, great quote from him, "There's no act too small, no act too bold. The history of social change is the history of millions of actions, small and large, coming together at points in history and creating a power that governments cannot suppress." This beautiful photo. Remember the nature around us that's always there, supporting and nurturing us. Okay. Oh, I'm forgetting. What is this last video? Oh, this is just a great 1-minute inspirational video that summarizes to me what's happening on our planet. I think you'll enjoy it.
Greatest transformation in human history is currently unfolding. An elegant metaphor to represent this is the metamorphosis of the butterfly.
When a caterpillar reaches a certain point in its own evolution, it savagely consumes everything in sight, eating hundreds of times its own weight. This catalyzes the emergence of new cells in its body. At first, these cells are attacked by the immune system, but as more and more of them emerge
and communicate with each other, they coalesce into a cooperative network and become the genetic directors of the future of the
caterpillar. At this point, all other cells dissolve into a nutritive soup that feeds and nourishes
the emerging body of the butterfly. As Elizabeth Sattouris suggests, we are these new cells on the planet coming together right now
to build a viable butterfly for the future of humanity and the world.
We are the imaginal cells, creating the new butterfly in transformation. Last quote for you. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. "Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach." And I just like to end coming back to every person in the world has a heart. And invite us to remember that as we explore all of these topics. Okay, so thank you very much. Here's these are some of the websites. We have some online courses in the bottom one there that are really great. Got great feedback. Do we have time for a few questions?
You were saying that there was for MK Ultra, there was 2 million documents destroyed because they knew they were going to be exposed, but there was 20,000 that remained. Do you know why there was 20,000 remained? Did they forget to do those? Or
yes. So why did the 20,000 pages not get destroyed? They were part of the financial files. So they didn't think there was anything in there. It was just a mistake on their part. And thank God they made that mistake, because otherwise we wouldn't know about any of this.
I didn't understand when you were talking about when one was hypnotized to becoming into a Manchurian candidate, that they could pass it on to someone else. What did that pass it on to someone else mean?
Pass on control. So in other words, I've been programmed with multiple personalities, and I have a handler that I recognize as the one who controls me. So by passing on code words and programming me, when you hear this person's voice using this code word, you will do what they say. Then he passes so that this person can also control me. So in other words, you may have to send, you may need to send this Manchurian candidate to Asia to do something. And you have a contact in Asia that you've given the code words, you've programmed your person here to be able to carry out and follow the orders of that person. Yeah. Dan. Yeah. Maybe one more question and then we need to, yes.
I want to thank you very much for mentioning earlier in the program that your inspiration is to cultivate radiant beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's very positive. And I like what you were discussing in the end about different meditation can be very positive. It also can be used for my research in a negative way in certain religious cultures.
Yes.
I've written a paper on that, and I'll give you a copy
Great.
later on.
Yes, thank you. It's a good point that, as I said, any of these technologies can be used for betterment or for personal gain, and meditation included. Okay, just because we're tight on time, we're going to have more question and answer. We're going to have a panel after the third talk, so you'll have more times to ask questions. But let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll have our last presentation. Thanks, everybody.